Good evening, class, and welcome to the Week 5 discussion board for MPA 594 Comprehensive Exam Seminar with Dr. Sundstrom. My name is Luis Chavarin, and thank you for being here this week. This week, I'll be identifying a public sector agency and identifying a major change that has to be made. I'll be delineating how the change will be made and backing why or how these changes will be made with theories and concepts. And I'll be identifying and detailing those appropriate themes and the theories or concepts behind them. So for the agency, I chose the United States District Court, Probation and Pretrial Services Office, and the change that is made that will need to be made is the merger of the pretrial supervision and investigations units into one unit under one supervising officer. The department head here will be Joey Basulto, and she has been designated to be in charge of this merger. And the three themes that I'll be applying will be public administration and pretty much the role of public administrators, and should public administration or public administration agencies be treated like business, and talk a little bit about the role of government based on documents such as the Constitution. We'll also be talking about organization, and this will include organizational structure, the coordination and division of labor, organizational culture, and organizational systems. And finally, I'll be discussing management and leadership, such as the functional management roles, leadership styles, and the human side of management, just to get the employees motivated for this change. For the first topic, we have the topic of public administration and just the role of public administration, the role of the federal government. And we can start off with the role of the federal government based on the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, and just the enumerated powers that the federal government has, and other themes such as the necessary and proper clause, which pretty much delineates all the laws which shall be necessary for carrying into execution the federal powers from the enumerated powers from earlier in that same section. We'll also be talking about Woodrow Wilson and his objective of administrative study, which is to find out what government can do and how it can do it with utmost efficiency. We can also talk a little bit about the dichotomy and whether politics and administration should be separate. He also goes on to say that public administration should be treated as a business and should be outside of the strife of politics. But we also have other theorists here, such as Appleby, Waldo, and Goodnow, who reject this political or politics administration dichotomy. And regarding the business, we can talk a little bit about how Allison and how he says that public and private management, how they're alike in all the unimportant ways. Appleby, and just how he delineates the differences between the public and the private sector, and why the public sector is different from the private sector. And again, he also rejected the dichotomy, Waldo, and his belief that true democracy and true efficiency are synonymous, and also rejected dichotomy. And finally, Goodnow, and how he believed that if there's not this harmony between politics and administration, and specifically if administration doesn't back down a little bit, that there's going to be this political paralysis. For organization, this is a very broad theme. We can start off with Frederick Taylor's scientific management and some of his ideas, such as the division of labor, and just the studying of, and pretty much breaking down every process into smaller processes. And obviously, once we have that, we can talk about the structure, such as a bureaucratic structure. But of course, when we're considering the bureaucratic structure, we have to consider the criticisms of bureaucracy, which is why I'll go into a little more detail in my paper. And then a big part of organization, Luther Gulick, and just his coordination and division of labor, how he believes that we have to have this blueprint, similar to how there's a blueprint of the house. We also have to have somebody who's not just making the blueprint, but also directing others on how to complete the house. And his central concern of organizational theory, which is pretty much states that it is the organization's responsibility to allow whoever's in charge to motivate its workers, which we'll get into a little bit later in the video. We'll also consider different theories for organizational culture, such as Theory Z by Auchi, which pretty much builds on Theory Y from McGregor, but adds in this aspect of organizational culture. We can also consider Senja's 3 levels of organizational culture, and obviously we have to consider systematic theory. This also helps in management when we get to conflict resolution and maintaining this balance. But we'll talk about systems theories such as Bernard, Merton and his middle range theories, Cotton Kahn and Bertalanffy, and their open systems. And we can also look into previous class, but basically Lewin's study on organizational change. And finally, we can talk about management and how Joey will be taking the reins and the type of leadership that she'll have and management roles that she'll have in making this merger. Obviously, we'll use Luther Gulick's PosCorp, and we'll talk a little bit about the relevance, whether that's still relevant today. A lot of the duties in PosCorp can now be outsourced to different individuals or different departments, just to make the role of leading or managing a little bit easier. We'll talk about leadership styles such as an autocratic leadership that may be needed at the beginning just to get the change roll or get the merger rolling, and then eventually shifting more into a transformational leadership style, which of course brings us to theories on human relations, including Alton Mayo's Hoffman studies, and just how people pretty much modify their behavior, modify their work in response to being observed. And we can't talk about motivation without talking about Follett, who was a major voice for participative of management or integrating, just focusing on the interrelationship between workers and management. And she was a very big voice too for conflict, or she was a very big proponent for conflict resolution. And super important too, it would be Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, and McGregor's theory Y, which kind of tie in together, and will be important for this merger in order to keep everybody motivated and just make this merger happen a little bit more smoothly. And finally, we can talk a little bit about management also regarding decision making and how we can take Lindblom's incrementalism, just to make the changes that need to be changed, and then come back and evaluate, and then again just continue making changes, small changes, until we can get optimal efficiency. And just the idea of Simon's bounded rationality, which pretty much states that normal consumer, normal individual isn't going to make decisions based on as much information as they can. They'll be making decisions that are basically good enough, not always the most efficient. And we'll have to consider this too when we're working on this merger and working on everybody putting in their part. That concludes this week's presentation. I hope everybody has a great week. Thank you.